It started with a glance, a fleeting connection that I should have dismissed but couldn't. For 14 years I had been with Derek, my husband and, I suppose, my partner in life. We had a comfortable home, a shared history and routines that shaped our existence. But comfort can be its own prison. Somewhere along the way the spark had dulled. Our conversations became logistical exchanges. What's for dinner, whose turn it was to pick up groceries, whether the bills had been paid. Love? It was there, I think, but buried under layers of predictability and habit. I didn't realize how starved I was for something more until I met Nathan. He came into my life like a storm, unexpected and electrifying. It was at a work conference of all places. I had almost skipped it, too tired from the monotony of my everyday life to care about networking or professional growth. But something, fate, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, drew me there. Nathan wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something magnetic about him. He had a confidence that wasn't arrogant, a smile that seemed to hold secrets, and a way of listening that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We were seated next to each other during a seminar, and by the end of the session we were deep in conversation about everything and nothing. It wasn't flirty, not at first, just two people connecting in a way that felt rare. But as the days of the conference unfolded, the connection deepened. We lingered over coffee breaks, laughing about shared jokes, trading stories about our lives. He was divorced, with no kids, a writer with a passion for travel, and an unquenchable curiosity about the world. His life was so different from mine, yet he saw me in a way Derek hadn't in years. He asked about my dreams, my fears, my regrets, and he actually listened. It was during the final evening of the conference, at a casual cocktail mixer, that everything shifted. The air between us was charged, and I knew he felt it too. When he reached for my hand as we stood on the balcony overlooking the city, my heart raced like it hadn't in years. "What are we doing?" I whispered, half hoping he would let go and half hoping he wouldn't. "We're acknowledging something real," he said softly. And in that moment I believed him. The next few weeks were a blur. We exchanged numbers, then texts, then long phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But the guilt was there too, gnawing at the edges of my joy. Derek wasn't a bad man. He was kind, reliable, and steady. But he wasn't Nathan. It didn't take long for Derek to notice the change. I wasn't as present, too often lost in my thoughts or glued to my phone. One night he confronted me. "Are you seeing someone else?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "No," I said quickly, too quickly. It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. What Nathan and I had wasn't physical yet. But emotionally, I was already gone. Derek's accusations forced me to confront the truth I'd been avoiding. I was standing at a crossroads, torn between the life I knew and the life I could have. Nathan was a risk, a leap into the unknown. But staying with Derek felt like resigning myself to a half-lived existence. The breaking point came one rainy afternoon. Nathan and I had planned to meet at a cafe on the edge of town, a place far enough away to feel safe. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting for me with that smile that always made me feel like the world was full of possibilities. I sat down, my heart pounding. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm married. I have a life. You deserve to be happy," he interrupted gently. "I can't tell you what to do, but I know what we have is rare. I know it's worth fighting for." His words lingered in my mind long after I left the cafe. That evening I sat alone in my car, staring at the house Derek and I had built together. It felt suffocating, like a monument to a life I no longer wanted. But leaving wasn't just about me. It was about breaking a man's heart, upending the life we had built together. In the end, I made a decision. I told Derek the truth. Not the details, but enough for him to understand that my feelings had changed. He cried, and I cried too, because endings are never easy. He begged me to stay, to try therapy, to fix what was broken. But I knew deep down that staying would be a lie, to him and to myself. Walking away from my marriage was the hardest thing I've ever done. It felt like tearing apart a piece of my soul. But with Nathan, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with risks and the possibility of failure. But for the first time in a long time, it also felt like it might lead somewhere worth going. Some chances come once in a lifetime. This was mine. I had to take it. After leaving Derek, Life didn't immediately transform into the fairy tale I had imagined. First, it was chaos. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, a temporary space with mismatched furniture and bare walls. It was quiet, painfully so. The absence of Derek's presence felt both liberating and haunting. I had made my choice, but the echoes of a 14-year marriage didn't fade overnight. Nathan was supportive, but he didn't rush me. He understood the enormity of what I had done and gave me the space to process it. We talked every day, his voice a comforting thread tying me to something hopeful. But as much as I wanted to throw myself fully into this new relationship, I was cautious. The guilt lingered, an unwelcome shadow in even our happiest moments. The first time Nathan came to see my new apartment, I was a bundle of nerves. I had spent hours cleaning and rearranging furniture, trying to make the space feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a home. When he walked in, he didn't comment on the sparse decor or the faint smell of fresh paint. Instead, he looked at me with that same steady gaze that had drawn me to him in the first place. "It's perfect," he said, pulling me into his arms, and for a moment I believed him. Our relationship unfolded slowly, like a cautious dance. There were moments of pure joy, weekend road trips to small coastal towns, lazy mornings spent tangled in each other's arms, and long meandering conversations about everything from philosophy to our favorite childhood memories. Nathan made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. But there were challenges too. Derek and I still had ties to untangle. The divorce proceedings were amicable, but every meeting with lawyers felt like reopening a wound. He didn't blame me outright, at least not anymore. But there was an unspoken bitterness in his eyes that cut deeper than any words could. Friends and family picked sides, some silently, others vocally. My mother, who had adored Derek, called me one night to ask if I had lost my mind. "Do you really think this Nathan is worth it?" she demanded. "You had a good thing with Derek. People would kill for what you had." What I had. The phrase lingered in my mind long after the call ended. It wasn't that what I had with Derek was bad, it just wasn't enough. But explaining that to others felt impossible. How do you justify breaking someone's heart because your own wasn't entirely whole? Nathan, for his part, was patient but firm. He didn't push me to cut ties with people who questioned my choices, but he also reminded me why I had made those choices in the first place. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he told me one evening as we sat on the floor of my apartment, sharing takeout. "Your happiness is reason enough." Despite his reassurances, doubts crept in during quiet moments. Was I selfish for leaving Derek? For pursuing this new love? I replayed the day I told Derek over and over in my mind, dissecting every word, every tear, wondering if there had been a different path I could have taken. But then there were moments when Nathan's presence silenced the doubts. Like the night he took me to a tiny jazz bar downtown. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the sounds of a saxophone and the low hum of conversations. Nathan held my hand under the table, his thumb tracing small circles on my skin. When the band played a slow, soulful tune, he pulled me to my feet. "I don't dance," I protested, laughing. "Neither do I," he said with a grin. "But let's embarrass ourselves together." We swayed awkwardly to the music, stepping on each other's toes and laughing until tears streamed down my face. In that moment, I felt a kind of joy I hadn't known was possible. A lightness that made the weight of my decisions feel worth it. But not every moment was like that. There were arguments, insecurities that bubbled to the surface as we navigated the complexities of a relationship born from something forbidden. I worried that Nathan would see me as untrustworthy, a woman who had left her husband for another man. He worried that I would wake up one day and decide the risk wasn't worth it. One evening, after a particularly heated argument about something trivial, whether or not we should spend Thanksgiving with his family, I broke down. "What if this doesn't work?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "What if I gave up everything for nothing?" Nathan knelt in front of me, his hands cupping my face. "You didn't give up everything," he said softly. "You chose something. You chose us. And I'm going to fight for us every single day, as long as you do too." His words stayed with me, anchoring me in moments of doubt. Slowly, I began to let go of the guilt, the fear, and the need to justify my choices to others. I focused on building something new with Nathan piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And that was enough. As the months turned into years, our relationship deepened. We moved in together, combining our lives in a way that felt natural and right. There were challenges, of course there were challenges, but there was also a kind of joy I had never known before. Nathan didn't complete me. He didn't fix me. But he walked beside me, supporting me as I rebuilt myself. Looking back now, I can see the enormity of what I did, the lives I disrupted, the pain I caused. But I also see the life I've built. A life filled with love, growth, and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing to be true to yourself. Some chances come once in a lifetime. I took mine. And I have no regrets. Nathan and I eventually found our rhythm, though it took time and effort. The early days of our relationship had been a storm. A mix of passion, uncertainty, and growing pains. But as the years passed, the storm gave way to something steadier. Something I could rely on. We created a life together. One that felt authentic and uniquely ours. Yet, life rarely unfolds without complications. The world doesn't pause for love to flourish. Nathan's career as a writer began to take off, and with it came the demands of travel and long nights of solitude while he worked. He had always been transparent about his goals, and I had supported him from the start. Still, there were moments when his absence felt heavy, and I had to remind myself that love isn't always about proximity. It's about connection. For me, the challenge was reinventing myself outside of our relationship. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Derek's wife. When I left that life behind, I realized I didn't entirely know who I was anymore. The process of self-discovery was messy, full of false starts and moments of doubt. I threw myself into hobbies, painting, yoga, volunteering at a local animal shelter. Some stuck, others didn't. But slowly I began to feel like my own person again, not just an extension of someone else. Nathan noticed the change. "You're glowing," he said one evening as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, the city lights stretching out before us. "It's like you're finally coming into your own." His words warmed me, but they also reminded me of the sacrifices he had made for us. While I was rediscovering myself, Nathan was pouring himself into his work, sometimes at the expense of his own well-being. He carried the weight of being my partner, my confidant, my safe harbor, and I wanted to ensure he felt just as supported as I did. So, I began to reciprocate in ways that mattered to him. I joined him on book tours when I could, offering moral support and companionship. I learned to appreciate the intricacies of his creative process, even if it sometimes meant giving him the space to disappear into his work. We made a pact to prioritize each other, even when life became hectic. It wasn't perfect, but it worked because we both wanted it to. And then life threw us a curveball. One day, as we were preparing dinner together, something we loved to do as a way of unwinding, I noticed Nathan seemed distracted. He was chopping vegetables absent-mindedly, his brow furrowed in a way that set off alarm bells in my mind. "What's on your mind?" I asked, setting down the knife I was holding. He hesitated, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I got an offer," he said finally. "A big one." The offer was a residency in Paris, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a writer of his caliber. It would mean 6 months abroad, fully immersed in his craft, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the literary world. It was everything he had ever dreamed of, and my heart sank as I realized what it could mean for us. "Wow," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's incredible." "It is," he admitted, but his excitement was tempered by something else, worry, maybe guilt. "But I don't want to leave you behind. I don't know how we'd make it work." The truth was, neither did I. 6 months apart felt daunting, especially after everything we had been through to be together. But I knew I couldn't be the reason he turned down an opportunity like this. Love, I had learned, wasn't about holding someone back. It was about setting them free to chase their dreams, even if it scared you. "You have to go," I said firmly. "This is your chance, Nathan. You've worked so hard for this." We talked late into the night, hashing out the logistics, the fears, the hopes. In the end, we decided to face it head-on. Nathan would go to Paris and we'd stay connected through calls, video chats, and visits when possible. It wasn't ideal, but it was a compromise we were both willing to make. The day he left was harder than I expected. Standing in the airport, watching him disappear through the security checkpoint, I felt a pang of loneliness that took me by surprise. But I also felt proud. Proud of him for chasing his dreams and proud of myself for supporting him. The months apart were challenging. Time zones and busy schedules made communication sporadic, and there were days when the distance felt unbearable. But there were also moments of joy, care packages exchanged across continents, handwritten letters that felt like a lifeline, and the excitement of planning our reunions. Each time we saw each other, it was like falling in love all over again. When Nathan returned, he was different, in the best possible way. The residency had rejuvenated him, reigniting his passion for writing, and giving him a renewed sense of purpose. And our relationship? It had grown stronger, forged in the fire of those 6 months apart. But life, as always, had more lessons in store for us. One evening, while we were sitting on the couch, Nathan turned to me with a serious expression. "I want to talk about the future," he said. It was a conversation we had danced around for years. Marriage, kids, long-term plans, things we had intentionally avoided discussing, while our relationship was still finding its footing. But now it felt like the right time. We didn't agree on everything. Nathan wasn't sure he wanted children, while I had always imagined myself as a mother. It was a hard conversation, filled with tears and difficult compromises. In the end, we decided to take it one step at a time. Neither of us wanted to lose what we had built, and we were willing to navigate the uncertainties together. Years later, as I write this, I can't say our life has been without challenges, but I can say it has been worth it. Nathan and I have built a life that feels uniquely ours, a tapestry of love, growth, and resilience. Some chances come once in a lifetime, and I'm grateful every day that I took mine. Because the risk? It gave me everything I never knew I needed. Life continued to unfold, not in the dramatic twists and turns of a movie script, but in the quiet, meaningful ways that make up a real relationship. Nathan and I built a life together that felt solid but never stagnant. There was always something new to discover about each other. Even years into our partnership, the growth we had both undergone, individually and as a couple, made every moment feel earned, like we were creating something truly lasting. But the complexities of life didn't stop at our front door. One of the biggest challenges we faced came in the form of my family. My mother, who had always been vocal about her disapproval of my leaving Derek, refused to fully accept Nathan. Every holiday dinner, every family gathering, carried an undercurrent of tension. She wasn't openly hostile, but her subtle comments, "Derek always loved this dish," or "It's a shame he doesn't come around anymore," were pointed. At first, Nathan shrugged it off, assuring me he understood. "It'll take time," he said. But as the years passed and her attitude didn't change, the strain began to show. One evening, after yet another awkward family gathering, Nathan sat me down. "I don't want to come between you and your family," he said, his voice measured but heavy with emotion. "But I can't keep walking into a room where I feel like I'm not welcome." His words broke my heart. I had always hoped my mother would come around, that she would see how happy Nathan made me and let go of the past. But her refusal to move on was threatening to put a wedge between us. I knew I had to address it. The conversation with my mother was one of the hardest I've ever had. Sitting in her cozy kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, I laid everything out. "Mom, I love you, but I need you to understand that Nathan is my future," I said, my voice trembling. "I know you love Derek and I know you think I made a mistake, but I don't. And if you can't accept him, you're going to lose me too." For a moment she said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I just don't want you to get hurt," she admitted quietly. "You took such a big risk, and I've always been afraid it wouldn't pay off." "It has," I said firmly. "And even if it hadn't, it was my choice to make." Things didn't change overnight, but the conversation marked a turning point. Slowly, my mother began to soften, her interactions with Nathan becoming less strained. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that was enough. Professionally, life brought new opportunities for both of us. Nathan's writing career continued to flourish, and I found myself advancing in my own field. A promotion at work meant more responsibilities but also more fulfillment. For the first time in years, I felt like I was thriving, not just surviving. Nathan and I celebrated every milestone together, from book launches to work anniversaries, always taking the time to acknowledge each other's achievements. But with success came new challenges. The demands of our careers sometimes left us feeling like ships passing in the night. There were weeks when our schedules barely aligned, when we were too tired to do more than exchange a few words before collapsing into bed. It tested us in ways we hadn't anticipated, forcing us to reevaluate how we balanced our personal and professional lives. One evening, after yet another missed dinner due to a late meeting on my end, Nathan surprised me with a weekend getaway. He didn't tell me where we were going, just asked me to pack a bag and trust him. We ended up in a small cabin in the mountains, surrounded by nothing but trees and the sound of a nearby stream. There was no cell service, no Wi-Fi, just us. For 2 days, we disconnected from the outside world and reconnected with each other. We hiked during the day, cooked simple meals together in the tiny kitchen, and spent the evenings curled up by the fireplace, talking about everything and nothing. It was a reminder of why we had fought so hard to be together in the first place. Love, we realized, wasn't just about the big moments, it was about the little ones too. As the years rolled on, the question of children resurfaced. It wasn't something we talked about often, but it was always there, lingering in the background. One day, while we were visiting friends who had recently had a baby, the topic came up again. "I see how you look at them," Nathan said later that night as we drove home. "You want that, don't you?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I think I do," I admitted. "But I don't want to pressure you into something you're not sure about." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "It's not that I don't want kids," he said finally. "I've just always been afraid I wouldn't be a good father. My own dad, well, he wasn't exactly a role model. His vulnerability caught me off guard." Nathan rarely talked about his father, a man who had left when he was young. I reached over and placed my hand on his. "You'd be an amazing father," I said softly. "I see it in the way you care for me, the way you pour yourself into everything you do. You have so much love to give." The conversation opened a door we had kept closed for years. We didn't make any immediate decisions, but we began to explore the possibility of expanding our family. It was a journey filled with excitement and uncertainty, but it was one we were ready to take, together. Looking back now, I can see how far we've come. Our life is far from perfect, but it's ours. Every challenge, every triumph, every quiet moment in between has brought us closer, weaving a tapestry of love and resilience that I wouldn't trade for anything. Some chances come once in a lifetime. Taking that chance was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it gave me a life I never could have imagined. A life filled with love, growth, and the kind of happiness that comes not from perfection, but from choosing each other every single day. And as I sit here now watching Nathan laugh at something on TV, his hand resting lightly on mine, I know with every fiber of my being that it was worth it. Every single moment. The years continued to roll by, each one carving its own unique groove into the life Nathan and I were building together. We celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, career milestones, and even the small, seemingly mundane moments, like a quiet Sunday morning spent reading on the couch or a shared laugh over a botched recipe. These were the stitches that held the fabric of our relationship together, tiny, unnoticed threads that created something beautiful and strong. But as time marched on, I began to notice subtle changes. It wasn't anything drastic at first, just a slower pace in Nathan's step, a furrowed brow when he thought I wasn't looking. He seemed preoccupied, as if carrying a weight I couldn't see. When I finally pressed him about it, he brushed it off, saying he was just tired or stressed from work. I wanted to believe him, but my gut told me there was more to it. One evening, after weeks of dancing around the issue, I came home to find Nathan sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty glass of wine. The sight of him like that, so quiet, so unlike himself, stopped me in my tracks. "Nathan," I said softly, setting my bag down. "What's going on?" He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his usual confident demeanor. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. My heart raced as I sat down across from him, 1,000 worst-case scenarios flashing through my mind. Was he unhappy? Was he leaving? Had something happened? "I've been keeping something from you," he began, his eyes fixed on the glass in his hand. "A few months ago, I went to the doctor for a routine checkup, and they found something unusual." The words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating and unrelenting. He explained that he had been diagnosed with a chronic illness, something manageable but life-altering. It wasn't terminal, he assured me, but it would require significant lifestyle changes and ongoing treatment. I didn't tell you right away because I didn't want to burden you, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want this to define us. I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. Nathan, we're a team. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. And we did. The months that followed were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, treatment plans, and adjusting to a new normal. It wasn't easy. There were days when Nathan's frustration boiled over, when the reality of his condition felt like too much to bear. But we faced it together just as we had promised. In some ways, the experience brought us even closer. We learned to cherish the little things even more. The quiet moments, the shared laughter, the simple joy of being in each other's company. It reminded us of the fragility of life, of the importance of holding on to what truly matters. As Nathan's health stabilized, we began to revisit the idea of starting a family. The road wasn't straightforward. His condition added complications we hadn't anticipated, but we were determined. After countless discussions with doctors, and even more discussions with each other, we decided to pursue adoption. The process was long and emotionally draining, filled with mountains of paperwork, home visits, and moments of doubt. But when we finally got the call, a little boy 3 years old waiting for a forever home, it all felt worth it. Meeting Liam for the first time was a moment I'll never forget. He was shy at first, hiding behind the social worker's legs, his wide eyes taking us in with a mix of curiosity and caution. But when Nathan crouched down to his level and offered him a toy car, something shifted. Liam's small hand reached out, and in that simple gesture, I saw the beginning of something beautiful. Parenthood was a journey unlike any other. Liam brought a new kind of chaos and joy into our lives, filling our days with laughter, messes, and the kind of love that makes you feel like your heart might burst. Nathan took to fatherhood in a way that surprised even him, his initial fears giving way to a quiet confidence. Watching him with Liam, teaching him how to build block towers, reading him bedtime stories, cheering him on at soccer games, I saw a side of Nathan I had never seen before, and it made me fall in love with him all over again. But parenting also brought its challenges. There were sleepless nights, tantrums, and moments of doubt about whether we were doing it right. There were times when we disagreed on how to handle a situation, our voices raised in frustration. But through it all, we never lost sight of the fact that we were in this together. As Liam grew, so did we. Our lives became a tapestry of soccer practices, school projects, family vacations, and quiet evenings at home. The years blurred together in a beautiful, chaotic dance, each one adding a new layer to the story we were writing. There were moments of heartbreak, too. We lost Nathan's mother to a sudden illness, a loss that hit him harder than I had anticipated. For weeks, he was a shadow of himself, retreating into a quiet grief that I struggled to penetrate. But with time, and with the love of our little family, he began to heal. Through it all, I never forgot the choice that had brought us here, the leap of faith I had taken all those years ago. It hadn't been an easy path, and it certainly hadn't been perfect. But as I sat on the porch one evening, watching Nathan and Liam chase fireflies in the fading light, I knew it had been the right one. Life, I realized, isn't about avoiding risks or making the safe choice. It's about following your heart, even when the road ahead is uncertain. It's about building something beautiful out of the imperfect, unpredictable pieces you're given. And it's about holding on to the people you love, no matter what challenges life throws your way. Nathan and I had taken a chance on each other, and in doing so, we had built a life that was messy, complicated, and deeply, profoundly meaningful. And for that, I will always be grateful. As the years unfolded, the life we built together deepened, richer with every passing season. Liam grew into a bright, inquisitive child who seemed to absorb the world like a sponge. His endless stream of questions filled our home with a vibrancy that never dulled. Why is the sky blue? Do fish sleep? Can we visit the stars someday? Every inquiry was a chance to see the world through his eyes, and Nathan and I delighted in answering, or more often, Googling the answers together. Nathan's health remained stable, a fact we never took for granted. His condition required ongoing management, but he approached it with the quiet determination that defined him. He would sometimes joke about the new normal we had created, but beneath the humor was a deep gratitude for the life we shared. Our family traditions grew alongside us. Friday nights became pizza and movie nights, with Liam insisting on toppings that ranged from pepperoni to pineapple to one memorable attempt at marshmallows. Summer weekends were often spent at a nearby lake, where Nathan taught Liam to skip stones while I sat on the shore, marveling at the easy rhythm they had found with each other. Holidays were chaotic but warm, filled with laughter, burnt cookies, and the occasional family mishap, like the time Liam accidentally knocked over the Christmas tree while showing off his new karate moves. But life, as always, had its challenges. As Liam entered his teenage years, the boy who had once clung to our sides became more independent, and occasionally more difficult. He tested boundaries, questioned rules, and like all teenagers, pushed back against the world around him. One evening, after a particularly heated argument about curfews, Liam stormed up to his room and slammed the door. I sat down at the kitchen table, exhausted and on the verge of tears. Nathan walked in, his expression a mix of concern and quiet amusement. "Remember when he used to think we knew everything?" I said, half laughing, half crying. Nathan sat down beside me and took my hand. "He still thinks that," he said softly. "He just doesn't want to admit it." His words stayed with me. Parenting a teenager was harder than I'd imagined, but it was also rewarding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Liam's growing independence challenged me to let go of the little boy I had raised and embrace the young man he was becoming. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And watching him find his place in the world was a joy unlike any other. As Liam navigated his teenage years, Nathan and I faced our own milestones. We celebrated our 15th anniversary, not of marriage, but of the moment we had chosen each other. The date had always felt significant to us, a quiet reminder of the leap we had taken. That year we decided to mark the occasion with a trip to Italy, a place neither of us had ever been but had always dreamed of visiting. The trip was everything we had hoped for. We wandered through the cobblestone streets of Florence, stood in awe beneath the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and shared long, leisurely meals in tiny trattorias tucked away from the tourist crowds. One evening, as we sat on a terrace overlooking the Tuscan countryside, Nathan reached for my hand. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't met?" he asked, his voice quiet. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Sometimes. But it's like trying to imagine the sky without the stars. It just doesn't make sense." He smiled back, and in that moment, I was struck by how much we had weathered together. How far we had come from the uncertain beginnings of our relationship. The life we had built wasn't just a result of chance. It was a testament to the choices we had made, over and over again, to fight for each other. As Nathan and I grew older, our relationship continued to evolve. The fiery passion of our early years had softened into something steadier, but no less profound. We knew each other's quirks and flaws inside and out, and we loved each other not in spite of them, but because of them. We had created a partnership built on trust, resilience, and a shared commitment to the life we had chosen. Retirement brought a new chapter. Nathan, ever the storyteller, began mentoring young writers, delighting in helping others find their voice. I found joy in volunteering at a community center, working with children who reminded me of a younger Liam. Our days were slower but filled with purpose, and we embraced the freedom to explore the world at our own pace. Liam, now a young man, found his own path. He graduated from college with a degree in environmental science and landed a job that took him to another state. Watching him pack up his car and drive away was bittersweet, a mix of pride and the ache of letting go. But Nathan and I supported him every step of the way, knowing that the best thing we could do as parents was to give him the freedom to spread his wings. And spread them he did. Liam thrived in his new role, calling us frequently with updates about his work, his friends, and eventually, the woman who would become his wife. Their wedding was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, tears, and the overwhelming sense that we had done something right. Seeing Nathan dance with Liam's bride during the reception, a moment filled with tenderness and humor, was a memory I knew I would cherish forever. Now, as I sit on the porch of our home, the sun setting over the hills, I find myself reflecting on the journey that brought us here. Nathan is beside me, a book in his lap and a contented smile on his face. Liam and his wife are visiting for the weekend, their laughter echoing from the kitchen where they're preparing dinner. Our life is not extraordinary by any conventional measure. We don't have fame or riches or the kind of achievements that make headlines, but what we have is something far more valuable. A life filled with love, resilience, and the kind of joy that comes from embracing every moment, both the good and the difficult. Looking back, I see the turning points, the decisions that could have led me down a very different path. I see the moment I met Nathan, the moment I chose to leave behind the life I knew for the life I wanted. I see the struggles, the triumphs, the quiet victories that shaped us into who we are today. Some chances come once in a lifetime. I took mine and it led me here, to a life I wouldn't trade for anything. A life filled with love, family, and the profound knowledge that the best decisions are the ones made with your heart. As the sun dips lower over the hills, casting golden light over the porch, I feel a deep sense of peace settle over me. Nathan looks up from his book, catching my gaze and smiles. It's the kind of smile that speaks without words. A shared understanding of the life we've built together, of the journey we've taken to get here. Inside, I can hear Liam and his wife laughing as they bicker over who forgot to set the timer for the bread in the oven. Their voices carry the warmth of a home filled with love, and it fills me with pride to know we played a part in shaping the man Liam has become. I turn back to Nathan, reaching out to take his hand, his fingers still warm and familiar after all these years, lace through mine effortlessly. It's a good life, isn't it? I say softly, more a statement than a question. It's the best life, he replies, his voice steady and full of conviction. Because it's ours. And it is. Every choice, every challenge, every triumph, and every quiet moment like this one has been uniquely ours. We've loved deeply, grown together, and weathered the storms that life inevitably brings. As the last rays of sunlight fade and the porch lights flicker on, I close my eyes and take a deep breath. I think of the chance I took all those years ago, the leap that seemed terrifying at the time but led me to everything I hold dear. Life isn't about guarantees or easy answers. It's about following your heart, embracing the uncertainty, and choosing love even when it feels like the harder path. I took that chance and it gave me a life I never could have imagined. A life I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. With Nathan's hand in mine and the sound of our family's laughter filling the air, I know one thing with absolute certainty. It was all worth it. Every single moment.